Guys, good morning. I'm appropriately hiding in my daughter's bedroom today as my kids are in my bed hanging out for a little bit. And I'm a little bit delayed posting some things on the site today, so you're actually getting it live here on Coffee Talk first before we're going to see it on the site because there was a few last minute changes I wanted to add. And I'm sure you've seen the debate over US currency that suddenly has whipped everyone into a frenzy. I don't mean to laugh. I'll get to that in a moment. But actually one of the most exciting headlines I've seen today is one you're probably not going to see many places, and that is the discovery of the final American slave ship called the Clotilda, and it was delivering African slaves to the United States far after that was illegal. Its last trip was in 1860, and there was legend that it was set on fire and set afloat because the people that were behind it wanted to cover their tracks. The reason why this ship is really important is that in Alabama, the descendants of this ship ended up setting up their own city, for lack of a better term, their own community with their own rules called Africatown. And there's still evidence of Africatown in Alabama today, and descendants of those generations still living there that want to preserve their history, their very unique history, because they use some African traditions to set up this town and how the community was organized. So I think it was last year, one historian thought he had found the ship, and it turned out it wasn't the case. But now the National Geographic Society worked with a historical organization in Alabama, and they think that they have found it. They have found this final ship and believe that that history is going to be really important to preserve, to tell the stories of this extremely unique community that's trying to continue to survive in America, to pass on this history. So I just included a little bit on the site today on that, but I'll look into it more because it's just when you think about it, 1860 is not that long ago. It's not that long ago. So this could be a really crucial part of American history because no slave ships have been preserved. Very few slave ships have been preserved. So what they found, how they found it, what it looks like is really important. So there's a link to that on our website if you want to check out National Geographic's write-up about that. So side note. Anyways, I'm always excited when there's something about American history that we can learn and get a little bit more, light on the past. So I hope to revisit that a little bit more. Okay, two big stories today I think you should focus on. One is a real conversation piece. So do we want to do the serious news first, or do we want to do kind of the fun news first? All right, let's do the serious news first because this could happen at any moment. And if you're watching early, I want you to know it. There was a young man from California that decided to leave California and in the late 1990s and travel to Yemen to learn Arabic. He was a Muslim convert, and he ended up traveling to Pakistan and wound up in Afghanistan where he was captured. He's known as the American Taliban, even though apparently he had associations with Al-Qaeda. He was then put into prison and was set to serve 20 years in prison. He's being released early and expected to be released today. His name is John Walker Lind. There's a lot of debate about his release, clearly because of his past association with terrorist organizations. And not only that, there's been some reports that are not fully confirmed by the government, but from reliable sources saying that the government's very concerned about his affiliations to this day. He is going to be released for good behavior because that's what typically can happen to someone that's serving 20 years. He's, almost served, I think he served a little bit over 17. So he's being released to strict probation. Here's the bigger story to all of this. Over the last 2 decades, America has arrested American citizens like this person who are convicted terrorists and serving time. Over the next several years, dozens of them apparently are up for the same sort of probation. And so the question becomes, this is another sort of chapter to the American war on terror. What do you do with these people? How do you release them? How do you monitor them? What are their recidivism rates, meaning their return to crime? Even if you stop their use of computers and passports, if they have an affiliation with terror, what is the effect on the community? So this is the bigger question. This story in the headline is there's a much bigger picture about how we're going to be handling this group of unique Americans that we haven't really seen before, those that have been arrested and convicted and imprisoned based on terror charges. So he's really almost the first case study, and that's why it's really important. And I mean, you can't ignore the timing. Here he's being released right before Memorial Day weekend, right, when we memorialize the soldiers that have been killed in America's wars, including those that have been killed in the war on terror. So a lot of emotion on that story. Watch for the headline on that. Know that there's a bigger picture about why we really need to care about this. So here's a little bit of it's a hard turn, but to another story that is getting a lot of attention, and that is what the Treasury Secretary said yesterday during a congressional hearing. The Treasury Secretary was asked about the redesign of America's currency. Here's the backstory. A couple years ago, President Obama made a comment that a little girl had asked him why there's not more women on America's currency, and kind of floated that idea. The Treasury Department, about a year after he made that comment, opened for public conversation what a redesign of America's currency would look like. They initially were starting with a redesign of the $10 bill with Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury, and they were met with a lot of backlash because of the popularity of the Broadway show Hamilton. So they didn't go that direction. What they announced in 2016, though, was one of the most major redesigns, or overhauls is the term that's been used, USA Today used that term, of America's currency since the late 1920s. And that would include a couple things. President Lincoln would stay in the front of the $5 bill, but on the back there would be a new design about the Lincoln Memorial and different important parts of history. On the $10 bill, Secretary Hamilton would stay, but America's suffragettes like Susan B. Anthony would go on the back. The $20 bill was a significant change. President Andrew Jackson would be taken off the front of the bill, and Harriet Tubman would be put on the front. Andrew Jackson would be moved to the back. So this was the idea. This was announced in 2016, year of the latest presidential election. So what you need to know is that it is mainly up to the Treasury Department to make any sort of decisions about redesign, because redesign really has more to do with counterfeiting than what, like the look. So Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said yesterday that he was more focused on counterfeiting efforts rather than the redesign. And basically he was going to put the redesign, because it was controversial, there was a lot of debate over it, basically push it to the next Treasury Secretary. So it wouldn't happen by 2020. Here's what I want you to know about this conversation. Number one, a lot of headlines are saying that President Jackson would be removed completely from the $20 bill. He wouldn't be removed, but he definitely would be demoted to the back. So just something you should know. The second thing is that the Treasury Secretary does have the right to make the call about redesigns. Congress can appeal to the Treasury, but it's really up to them. So he didn't say that it's never going to happen. He just said that it's not going to happen right now. The deadline that some are talking about, the idea that suffragettes would appear on the $10 bill, or this redesign would be in place by 2020, is something that I've been looking for. In the original press releases, the Treasury Department does not talk about that. They said we should put this redesign into effect as soon as it's safe. And so there wasn't really by 2020. 2020 was going to be the year of celebrating 100 years of the women's vote. So that's why the timing would make sense. But I think the timing was a little bit not totally secure. And the $10 bill was thought to go first because it's actually the bill that is more easily counterfeited than the $20 bill. I hope that makes some sense and illuminates a little bit of this debate, because I remember when it first broke in 2016, people were really upset or really excited about it. And if you're going to be really upset or really excited about something, I want you to know what's actually going on with it. So bottom line is, it's not completely off the table, but doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. If an act of Congress forces it to happen, it could happen sooner. But remember, a redesign is for the purpose of counterfeiting, not just image. And by the way, how many of you really use cash anymore? That's really what the bigger question is. People are going to take these bills and frame them because everybody's using, everyone's using electronic money. Here we're talking about, cities banning retailers from only using, cashless currency. And then there's still this debate about what happens with our currency because we still care about it. By the way, in my research on this, I didn't realize that In God We Trust was only added to the currency in the 1950s. That seems really recent, right? Because I think it's always on there, but apparently it's not. So we've changed currency before. We could change it again. This could happen. You get another president in, the next Treasury Secretary decides to do it. There you go. If Congress acts, it could happen sooner. We'll see. I'm curious how much this matters to you and what you think about it. I think it's really interesting to take a look at our currency, though, and understand there's so much that goes into it. Okay, guys, so those are a few stories I think you need to know on your Thursday as you get set for the weekend. Hopefully a long weekend. We'll be talking a little bit about Memorial Day and why it matters and some things to think about in our week in review, which I think is going to be a little more personal, a little more commentary than usual. You know, I don't like to do that. I like strictly nonpartisan. But this, as a wife of a veteran, is always a really important weekend for us. And so I always have a lot of deep thoughts, or so I think. I hear Lion Guard playing in the background, so I'm going to go check on my kiddos. Have a great day, you guys. And if you have any stories you want us to check out, remember info@smarternews.com or direct message us on social media. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you later.